Hi all, today I want to show you how you can apply MIDI FX plugins to both audio tracks and mix buses inside of Logic X. The idea for this video came about as I've been experimenting with creating an intimate campfire sound effect. Before I go any further, if you've landed on this video because all you need to know is how to apply MIDI effects to audio channels and buses, then I've included timestamps below for you to skip ahead. But for those of you interested in the way I came to this method, allow me first to provide some context. So I found a video by a YouTuber who goes by the name of DNoisyGuy. In it, he outlines how to create a burning fire sound effect using Massive. Here's a quick demo of his sound for your ears, and if you're interested, you can check his video out with the link below. In the sound he created, I could hear that mid-range noise characteristic typical of the physical reaction of fire. But as my sound was going to be more intimate in nature, I needed to make some big adjustments to reach my final destination. I first added some EQ to get me much closer to the desired result. I then employed a gain plugin to be modulated by a modulator MIDI FX unit in order to achieve a level of movement you would expect from a small fire as the wind fans its flames. As you can see here, the gain is being modulated just by this random curve here drawn in by the modulator effects unit. It's quite simple to do this. You just have to click on the target destination here, select Learn Plugin Parameter, and then hit the plugin parameter you wish to modulate. All of the other settings here are just set to taste. Next, I had the problem of this sound being in mono, and this is where things got a little bit more interesting. I first decided to duplicate the instrument track and apply a medium pan to each instance of Massive. Immediately though, this is sounding far too wide. If I reduce the panning to compensate, then we're left with a rather flat and unconvincing sound. So why is this? Well, it's because each of the gain plugins are being modulated independently at random, and this is resulting in quite a big difference between what we hear in the right and left channel. Remember that each of the instances of Massive have their own internal LFOs modulating parameters such as the colour of their noise generators independent from each other. When panned left and right, this is what gives us a sense of stereo field, and if we disable the newly added gain plugins and revert back to our medium panning, then the effect is quite pleasing again. Notice the change in width as we toggle the gain plugins off and on. If we imagine the fire itself, as the wind hits the fire and fans the flames, the effect in the left and right would not be so independent. It's a hard concept to try to explain, but think of it like this. If you got up close to a fire, then you would be able to hear the differences in the sound hitting your right ear from your left. But if you step back, then you would notice the wind fueling the overall intensity of the flames as a whole. You wouldn't hear this effect in the stereo detail you had when you were first up close. When we added the gain plugins to emulate the wind fueling the fire, it's as though we hear two very independent wind sources fanning the flames on the left very differently to the flames on the right. It's as though there were two fires, and this is why it now sounds too wide. So to bring this all back to earth, I need to apply the gain modulation on the sound as a whole and not to the left and the right channels individually. And this is where another problem arises, because if I route these two channels through a mix bus and apply a singular gain plugin, then I'm no longer able to apply randomized modulation because Logic's modulator and other MIDI effects are only available on software instrument channels. Just to quickly demonstrate, if I manually turn this knob, you'll hear the effect that we desire. There you can hear a stereo fire, which is being fanned by a singular wind source, if you like. And sure, I could create some automation for this parameter, but that wouldn't be random, and at some point, across 2-3 minutes of audio, I'd have to loop that automation. So what's the solution? Well, we have our source track, in this case the mix bus, but it could just as well be an audio track, and we want to employ the modulator MIDI effects to a gain plugin on that said track. The simplest way to do this is to create another software instrument track to house the MIDI effect we want and to route our sound through that new track. First then we can actually disable the output of our source track now because it's not possible to actually set an instrument track as the destination here. I'll also just deactivate the gain plugin as well. Over on the new instrument channel, we have to employ an instrument in order to activate the channel. Without this step, the method will not work. I'm going to select the test oscillator as it has a low CPU usage compared to Logic's other software synths, and we can actually disable this, however, as it serves no purpose other than to tick a box inside of Logic's programming. I'll then bring in an instance of Logic's stock compressor plugin and open it up. Now we're not going to apply any compression with this, and so most of it can be ignored. Instead, I come over to the sidechain section and set our source track as the sidechain input like so. Then under the sidechain button, in the filter section, we can select listen mode to hear only the sidechain input, and there we have it. We're effectively routing the bus to this instrument channel, and we can begin applying MIDI effects to any plugins present in the chain after this compressor plugin. So to continue on with the previous example, I'm going to employ a gain plugin here, and then a modulator MIDI effect up top. And using the same method as described before, we can select the target here to learn plugin parameter on the gain plugin. Obviously that's too much right now, but we can bring down these levels to make things a little more subtle. And for the purposes of this, I'm going to go with a random waveform. I'm going to increase the smoothing all the way to 1. Okay, that's sounding much more like the sort of thing that I was going for. One final thing that I'm going to do here though is actually bring in a second MIDI effect above the initial modulator, and this is going to be another modulator. And the reason for this is that, as we were saying before with the nature of fire and true randomization, we don't want to hear any sort of pattern in this sound. And right now, what I can hear is that although this is random, it's never really speeding up or slowing down. And what I'm talking about here is the rate knob. So we're going to employ a second modulator, click Learn Plugin Parameter, and assign that to the rate knob. And now we're able to change the speed at which this new random waveform fluctuates. So I'm just going to bring a few different settings in here and just tune this to taste. And there we have it. For the purposes of what I'm doing, that's a pretty good starting point for a campfire sound effect. I'm going to include a lot of Foley and things in a later video, which I'll pile on top of this sound, but this was just to explain really how I came to the basis of this sound effect, and also for people that wanted to know how to use the MIDI effects onto audio and mix bus channels. I hope this has really helped. If it has, please consider leaving me a like and a comment down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.